Hey guys, Colton here. We'll get back to the podcast in just 1 minute. I just wanted to let you know that my new book, 24 Rules of Masculinity, is officially out. If you've been resonating with the topics we've hit on in this podcast, discipline, purpose, identity, what it means to be a man today, this book was built for you. It's a straight talking guide packed with hard lessons, biblical principles, and the kind of clarity that I think a lot of us are starving for. So whether you're just starting on your journey or looking to get back on track, I wrote this to be something that you can pick up, apply, and carry with you. You can find the 24 Rules of Masculinity on Amazon and through the link in the description. I would love to hear what you guys think. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back to Chasing Masculinity. Today, we're tackling a question that weighs on a lot of couples. Can you really raise children on a single income in today's world? The cultural narrative says no. We're told it's impossible without 2 full-time paychecks, a perfect house, and this financial security that just never wavers. But is that really the truth, or is it just a myth that keeps a lot of families waiting too long to start the journey? Now, this episode isn't about guilt or politics or kind of playing a comparison game. It's about clarity, maybe some encouragement, and hopefully some practical wisdom for men and families who feel the tension between financial reality and the calling to raise the next generation. And truthfully, this one's for me. I've been struggling with this a lot over the past year or so. So a lot of this comes from within, and it's the conversations I've been having with myself. So let's break it down, what it costs, what's possible, and why the legacy of children, I think, is probably worth more than any lifestyle of comfort. So let's get into it. So let's start by talking about the financial landscape of, can you raise a family on one income? So the income versus the costs. The median household income in the U.S. was about $74,000-ish a year in 2023. The median home price in 2023, which these are just the stats that I was able to pull from, I believe it's the U.S. Housing Bureau or whatever it's called. This is the last year they have their official stats. So 2023, it's probably somewhere in that ballpark. You know, with inflation, it's increased a little bit. But median home price 2023, $420,000. So I grew up before at least buying a home, or I was naive enough to think that the average home price was around that $200,000-ish. That's because in 2015, it was $250,000. That was the median home in price in 2015. So it's nearly doubled in less than a decade. And I know it's encroaching rapidly to that $500,000 mark. So it's probably pretty much doubled in a decade. And mortgage rates really have just been hanging in that 6 to 7% from 23 to 24. So there really hasn't been a substantial decrease in rates that would justify the massive increase in home costs. So think of that 3% mortgage rate during those pandemic lows. So that means that monthly payments for that same house has pretty much doubled for many buyers. So those numbers: average or median household income, $74,000. Median home price, $420,000. Mortgage rates, 6 to 7%. And that home price and those mortgage rates have doubled in the past few years. And that leads me into renting versus owning, because the national average for rent is now over $2,000 plus a month. And many of you are living in areas such as myself before moving to Colorado, although Colorado is honestly no different than California. You'd think $2,000 a month. I wish. I knew people who were paying well into the threes for an apartment that very much should not be legal to live in. That is how substantial rent is in some of these more populated areas where there's just a high demand, like the Bay Area or New York City. Easily gets into the 5s, 6s, 7s for what very well could just be an average apartment. And compare renting now to owning. There is obviously a much higher upfront cost. There's the down payment, there's the taxes, there's potential repairs, but you are going to build that equity and hopefully stability over time for actually paying on something that you will own. But that's that big factor with that single income. That means families probably, unless you are very lucky or you have worked very hard and have a very high income, are going to have to choose smaller or older homes, or probably both, or even just choosing to rent long term to reduce that stress. Now, I know the average rent has increased a lot, but it has not come close to what an average or a decent first-time homebuyer house's mortgage would be without a substantial down payment or being able to buy down the rate substantially. So that's that big factor in renting versus owning, is the cost to rent is still substantially cheaper. Now I want to get into the cost of raising children and the questions that come with that, because the USDA estimate, this was back in 2015, so you can only imagine that this is much higher now, $233,000 to raise a child to the age of 18. That is like $12,000 to $13,000 a year that it costs to raise a child. But every single parent I've talked to says that this number is grossly inflated. And that's because, to be fair, it assumes just top-end spending everywhere. So that's going to be everything from extracurriculars to schooling, private education, etc. And that also talks highly about childcare, which I'm going to get into in a second. But if you're talking about the core cost to raise a child, so food, clothes, shelter, all those things, it is not even close to being that high. Many families raise their kids on far less. In fact, I don't know anybody who spends $250,000 to raise their kids unless they're very affluent and paying for private education. But childcare, why is that number so high? That's that hidden elephant. It is one of the largest costs for dual income houses, because obviously you need childcare because both parents are working. It is easily $1,200 to $1,500 a month per child for many states. That's like $15,000 to $18,000 a year that would get cut out of your post-tax paycheck to pay for kids, just so you can have both families working. And I know that there are some tax benefits to having to pay for daycare, but still, that is a large chunk of change that you need to write a check for each month. For 2 kids, the average still in America to have, that's $30,000 a year just in childcare. That can eat almost half of one parent's take-home pay if you're talking about the median income of one individual. And again, that's the median, which means half is going to make less than that. $60,000 a year is a lot more than a lot of people make. So there's many people who struggle to make $30,000 a year, which means $30,000 in daycare is just downright impossible. So removing those childcare costs by one parent staying at home, it makes single income homes more realistic than some people might realize if you're factoring that into the cost of childcare. So that kind of puts a little bit of a perspective on it, because with the average household income of $74,000 versus the cost of raising a kid a year, which is that 12 to 15, and that's again assuming you have one kid, one parent's income alone should or might cover the essentials, assuming that spending is prioritized. The financial impossibility narrative is, again, often tied to the lifestyle expectations, not necessarily those survival needs. So what are the growing trends that we're seeing then in raising a child? One, there's the obvious, just delaying having kids. The average age for the first-time mothers is now over 30 years old, which is the highest ever in history. In the 1970s, it was close to like 21 to 22 years old. That is a massive increase in age. And saying you're in your young 30s when you have your first kid is not even abnormal. No one would bat an eye at that. If you have one earlier, it might actually seem more abnormal than waiting till you're in your 30s. And a lot of the reasons cited are student debt, career goals, or just an unstable housing market, because you want that desire, or there's a desire for financial stability first, which, to give the devil his due, is an absolute noble desire. It's the same desire I had as well, and still obviously have as the man of the house, trying to now provide for somebody struggling with these exact same things. But there are consequences of delaying. Fertility windows do shrink with age. Many couples who are going to wait until they're ready then discover just more medical obstacles related to their age. My wife and I know many, many people who just for one reason or another have waited, by choice or not their choice, to be in their 30s when they have kids. And you just have to be prepared that there might be some more obstacles. I've heard it been said many times by Dr. Jordan Peterson. I haven't actually fact-checked this one, but he says repeatedly that 50% of women over the age of 30 will not have kids. Who do not have kids right now will not have kids. So that is kind of a scary statistic, thinking about how many moms or families are waiting until they're over 30 to have kids. Well, now half of those won't. And if over half of people trying to have kids or wanting to try kids wait till they're 30, that means 25% of married couples or women just won't have kids, if that is in fact true, which is also a very terrifying thought, because I just find it hard to believe that 25% of people never want to have kids. Then there's the other things with age and waiting as well, such as older parents regretting missing younger years of parenting, just having less energy or more health concerns. But there's also this weird cultural shift where children are being treated as this optional extra. It's no longer a necessity or a thing that you do in life. It's like a choice. It's like a choose your own adventure, and kids might not be on that list anymore because lifestyle goals are becoming more central to someone's part of life. And I feel like I need to touch on the regret in waiting, because many, many couples from the surveys taken who delayed children end up regretting it later. They wish they had started earlier despite those financial concerns. Many of the parents I've talked to, many of the couples or moms or dads that my wife and I, or my wife separately, have had conversations with, just wish, no matter what struggles, no matter how hard it would have been, just kind of wish they would have done a little bit earlier. And that's been a big reality check for me, is learning that the money will never be perfect. There will never be a time when the bank account says, yes, now you can do it. And waiting is honestly rarely going to change that. So, the feasibility. How on earth do families make it work? One, I think there really has to be a mindset shift. And again, I want to preface all this. I don't have kids yet, but these are things I have been deeply wrestling with and talking with a lot of people about. So a lot of these are my own coming to Jesus moments with this very same topic. But that mindset shift, that question is not, can we afford everything? It's really what matters most and what can we sacrifice? What fat can we trim? That comfort culture that we live in says bigger house, nicer cars, expensive daycare, multiple vacations. These are all things I desire and talk about frequently. But that counter-cultural approach of having the smaller house or older cars or just fewer extras, but having one parent stay at home for stability and not having someone else raise your kid, that payoff is, I don't know if you can put a financial dollar on that payoff. And that's the case for single income living. One, yeah, there's that childcare savings, which is huge. Stay-at-home parents just eliminate the need to have to send your kid to be watched by somebody else. That's one of the largest expenses in modern family life. But more importantly, I think there's a stronger family structure. I would find it very hard to make a case that having two people or two parents working compared to having one of them stay at home to raise the kid ends up being better. One parent being always present, constantly teaching, discipline, being present at home, instead of subjugating that to somebody else, that is so crucial. And that's that countercultural projection, with many schools and educations increasingly being shaped by political and cultural agendas. Having one parent at home being involved just provides a better balance, and it at least allows you to teach your kids your values, your core traits, how you want them to be raised, rather than subjugating that to somebody else who might not have the same perspective or agenda. But that does, again, go back to there being sacrifices. That means maybe you do need to rent. Maybe you need to have a smaller home, drive older cars, cut back on vacations or eating out or entertainment. They're trade-offs, but they're not failures. We have to get out of the Instagram way of living where people have it all. These are not shortcomings. And I'm talking to myself here because I know there's sacrifices I'm going to have to make, and I will view them as shortcomings, as failures for not being able to provide this lifestyle that we've come accustomed to, or that we want, or that we are expecting at this stage in life and not being able to have because of this choice. But man, I think they're just going to allow greater long-term rewards through children, through the legacy that you're able to create, and also just that peace of mind of being able to raise your own kids. To tie this back to my faith, 1 Timothy 6:6, godliness with contentment is great gain. So that measure of success isn't luxury. It's stewardship. Are you stewarding your family, your children, your faith? Raising children is not just a financial question. It is a calling. Provision, it's more than money. It's presence. It's time. It's also your faith. Imagine if you don't have time to go to church because you're working so much. That's a pretty big hindrance to how you're raising or how you're leading your family, how you're stewarding your family and their faith. The same could be said about not being able to have one parent at home and sending your kids to a public school where they're probably not learning what you would want them to be learning. So, some encouragement for men and for providers. The role of the man is a provider. That's just a piece of the puzzle that we have to take on as a man, as a husband, as a father. And scripture and tradition place provision on the shoulders of men. Not just financial provision. Maybe it doesn't work that way in your household. But definitely spiritual and emotionally as well. You have to still lead. You still have to steward regardless. Provision equals stewardship. It means wisely managing what God has entrusted to you. It means sacrifice is at the core. A man denies luxury. You're going to have to deny luxury. I'm going to have to deny luxury for the sake of my legacy. I think single income living is going to be one of the most challenging things I've ever taken up in life. But God, I hope it is not impossible. I really do. I really hope we can break this chain of needing two incomes. I hope more people do this too. Our grandparents lived this way. One parent worked, one raised a kid. Yes, I know. The price of housing and everything else has increased substantially, and with introducing women to the workforce, it made everything double the price, so now you have to have two incomes. I get it. I understand that's where we're at. But people still do it. Modern society has inflated these necessities into luxuries. New cars, constantly eating out, massive homes. They're things that, think of the house that our grandparents were in. I bet you a lot of people, they've known their grandparents to be in the same house their entire life, and that's where they raised their kids, and they were content with it. You're stripping back this excess. I think one income can stretch further than people realize. So here's some practical steps that I think might make it feasible. One, obviously, debt control. Debt sucks. I get it. I got student loans. I got a car payment. I got a mortgage. It's not fun. Debt is one of the biggest obstacles to single income feasibility. It's one of my obstacles too. So that's where limiting that credit card reliance or unnecessary car payments or just aggressively paying down student loans comes in handy. And then also budgeting with intentionality. So many great books on stewarding your finances and budgeting that I couldn't recommend them all. Just find one and start if you need a place to start that journey, to get an understanding if you feel lost. And just budget with that intentionality. You need to know what your needs are. They have to be crystal clear. Your needs are housing and food and transportation and healthcare, and
having some sort of savings. Your wants are things like streaming subscriptions. I know having Netflix is not a necessity. That was a shock to me too, but it's true. Dining out and all these frequent upgrades, they're things that might not be necessary if the budget doesn't allow it. You have to be able to make that call yourself. And every single dollar is going to tell a story. So just make sure that that story reflects your values. Obviously, location is going to make a big difference in this too, because housing and costs of living vary drastically throughout different states and cities. Raising kids on one income in San Francisco, that's near impossible unless you're making $250,000 a year. It really is. But in smaller cities, just outside of the Bay, it might be doable. It really comes down to where you're at and what you're able to do with the cards you've been given, and if there's a way that you can potentially get into an area that you can afford to do this. Sometimes that sacrifice is moving where life is more affordable so your family can thrive. And community and brotherhood, I go back to this a lot, makes a big difference. It helps. The early church thrived on communal support. There's no reason that has to change. Church and family networks can help with these childcare costs and meals and just emotional encouragement. And brotherhood, having other men around who share your vision, who are going through the same struggle, who have come through the other side or are just contemplating these very issues now. It will help lighten the load. And then have your long-term vision. Think decades ahead, not months. In the short term, you might have to sacrifice vacations or living in a smaller house, but long-term, what if you're raising disciplined, faith-filled children who one day just reshape the world? It doesn't mean you're never going to get a vacation again. It means this is the sacrifice you have to make for the next 10 years. The trade-offs now will hopefully compound into legacy later. So, into the application or the questions for reflection. These are things that I've been asking myself a lot lately. Am I, or are you, delaying children for legitimate financial barriers or just because we want comfort? That one's really been on my heart a lot lately. And also, what sacrifices are worth making for the sake of building a family? Are you willing to sell that third car? I wasn't for the longest time. I still might not. Jury's still out. But what sacrifices are worth making for the sake of building a family? And then also, are we more concerned with lifestyle upgrades than a legacy? That's a big one too. People don't talk about the legacy of children, of raising a family, and what it means to properly do that. And if single income household, so that one parent can stay home, paints a better picture of legacy for you, then that's one of those sacrifices you're probably going to have to heavily consider. So that's my challenge. Run your numbers honestly. Run the numbers. Build a budget, assuming one income. See what happens. Compare it to your lifestyle. Does something need to be cut out? And then remove that emotion. Look into the reality. Many couples find it a lot more possible than they first thought. So that's my encouragement. There's never going to be a perfect financial moment to start a family. Every single parent I've ever talked to, regardless of their fiscal position, has said that. The conditions, they're always going to be less than ideal. So don't let that fear rob you of the joy of children. So at the end of the day, raising kids on a single income, it's not going to be about chasing perfect numbers or waiting for those flawless conditions. Weak men are always going to look for an excuse. I did for years. I still am. Strong men choose responsibility. They choose legacy. And then they trust God to provide when the math looks maybe impossible. We've seen the truth. It will require sacrifice. It will require wisdom more than we have. It will require you to strip away comfort for the sake of something hopefully greater. But true wealth isn't found in luxury. It's found in children, in family, in that legacy, that masculine legacy that we talk so much about. And that's going to outlive you. So run those numbers, build a target, ask those hard questions to yourself. And if you're delaying a family just for comfort, stop waiting. See what happens. The perfect time doesn't exist, but the right time might be right now. Keep chasing masculinity, guys. Keep becoming a man worthy of leadership, worthy of trust, and worthy of peace. I'll see you guys in the next one.